Think for a second about those rare, defining moments in history that force us to completely question everything we think we know about evil. For decades, Americans held on to this really comfortable belief that danger usually came with a warning. People just expected criminals to look suspicious, to act strangely, or to visibly stand apart from the crowd. We all wanted to believe that a threat would be, well, obvious. But then came Theodore Robert Bundy. Throughout this explainer, we're going to look closely at the man behind the mask. And to be clear, this is absolutely not about glorifying a killer. Instead, it's about remembering the young women whose lives were stolen, honoring the investigators who flat out refused to give up, and understanding the hard lessons that literally forever changed criminal investigations in the United States. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast. In the 1970s, society fully expected a criminal to be an outsider. But Ted Bundy? He bypassed that expectation entirely. He didn't fit the image of a dangerous man at all. He was educated, he was articulate, he was described by almost everyone as incredibly charming. He volunteered in political campaigns, he studied law, and he appeared to live a completely ordinary, successful life. He blended right into everyday society, smiling easily and carrying on long, engaging conversations. He weaponized this carefully crafted, educated appearance to completely bypass America's expectation of danger, easily gaining the confidence of strangers who never suspected a thing.
Part 1. The Face of Danger. A childhood full of questions.
So, before we get into the crimes, we really need to understand his background to add some crucial psychological context. From the very beginning, in 1946, uncertainty surrounded his life. He was born in Burlington, Vermont, and his early years were actually defined by a massive family deception. Because of the heavy social stigma surrounding children born outside of marriage at the time, the true circumstances of his birth were completely hidden from him. For years, he was raised believing that his grandparents were actually his parents, and that the woman who was truly his mother was just his older sister. Eventually, he moved with his mother to Washington State, where she married a man named Johnny Bundy, and Ted adopted his surname. Now, historians and psychologists still debate how much this early deception actually affected him. And look, countless people who experience difficult childhoods never become violent offenders, right? But this deep instability and these massive unanswered questions were undeniably a defining feature of his youth.
Part 2. Shadows in the Northwest.
By the early 1970s, the Pacific Northwest was transforming. It was experiencing this rapid growth that attracted tons of young professionals and families. Public parks were crowded, and college campuses were incredibly busy. Young women were walking across these campuses or heading to events with absolutely no reason to suspect they were being watched. And then, this terrifying emergence of isolated disappearances began. At first, they seemed totally unrelated. Families were desperately searching for daughters who simply never returned home. One of the earliest known victims was Linda Ann Healy. She was a responsible, dependable 21-year-old university student deeply loved by her friends and family. But in early 1974, she just vanished from her home, leaving behind signs she had been attacked while she slept. Parents were waiting for phone calls that never came, and this unimaginable nightmare began spreading across the region.
Which brings us to a massive systemic hurdle of that era. How do you catch a killer when the clues don't cross county lines? Think about how police departments operated back then. Basically in total isolation. Despite the growing panic and the mounting disappearances, investigators really struggled to connect the dots. An agency in one county wasn't talking to an agency in another county, let alone another state. They investigated individual missing persons cases manually, with almost zero communication between different jurisdictions. Because of this deeply flawed system, no one yet realized they were all looking for the exact same offender.
Part 3. The Weaponization of Trust. Okay, let's dive into this.
Because survivors later described encounters with a polite man who followed a chilling step-by-step method. As spring turned into summer, a terrifying pattern finally emerged among the missing students. He would wear a sling or fake an arm injury, then he would politely ask a young woman for help loading something into his vehicle. It seemed like a completely harmless request from an attractive, well-spoken guy. But that was the trap. He exploited their willingness to help. He lured his victims by weaponizing human empathy. Acts of kindness literally became opportunities for violence. It's absolutely crucial that we frame his success not as the work of some dark genius, but as a devastating, horrific manipulation of virtue and basic human kindness.
Part 4. Panic at Lake Sammamish.
July 14, 1974 marks a dramatic turning point. Lake Sammamish State Park was absolutely packed. Families were enjoying the sunshine, kids were playing on the shoreline. It seemed like the safest place imaginable. Yet in broad daylight, with literally hundreds of potential witnesses nearby, two young women, Janice Ott and, just hours later, Denise Nosland, vanished without a trace. Witnesses reported that a well-dressed young man with his arm in a sling had been approaching women throughout the day, asking for help carrying a sailboat to his car. And crucially, he introduced himself simply as Ted. These brazen daylight abductions finally shattered his mask and left investigators absolutely shocked.
Part 5. Hunting the Name Ted.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the entire investigation suddenly shifted. Police finally had multiple concrete witness descriptions of the same offender. Witnesses from Lake Sammamish kept repeating the exact same details: an injured arm in a sling, a light-colored Volkswagen Beetle, a polite, soft-spoken demeanor, and the name Ted. Investigators rapidly distributed this information all throughout Washington state. For the very first time, neighboring states began actively comparing their own missing person cases against this specific profile. Slowly, the horrifying realization set in across law enforcement. They were no longer dealing with isolated incidents. They were hunting a highly mobile serial killer.
Now, it's really important to connect this to how we do things today, to truly grasp how difficult this hunt was. Today, we rely on rapid forensic evidence sharing, national DNA databases, and computerized records that instantly connect police departments nationwide. But in the mid-1970s, none of that existed. Every single lead, every comparison across state lines required manual phone calls, physical paperwork, and just relentless persistence. To put that into perspective, investigators had to hunt a cross-jurisdictional serial killer completely in the dark. They were painstakingly piecing together a giant puzzle without the aid of modern technology, making this one of the largest and most complex criminal cases of its time.
As the summer of 1974 came to an end, a deep, pervasive fear had spread across the Pacific Northwest. Parents were warning their daughters not to walk alone. College students completely changed their daily routines. It was a profound loss of innocence, as communities that once felt totally safe began locking their doors earlier and earlier each evening. Somewhere out there, moving seamlessly from place to place, a mystery man named Ted remained at large, while the families of the missing fell deeper and deeper into unimaginable grief.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to reflect on. How many lives could have been saved if modern forensic networks existed back then? This case highlighted the devastating historical limitations of 1970s law enforcement. But ultimately, it became a major catalyst that forever changed how criminal investigations are conducted in the United States. It's an incredibly dark chapter, but one that undeniably reshaped our modern world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.